Hello and welcome to Recharge at Home, where we're going to be giving you regular updates from inside Jaguar Racing. We're going to look back at some of the key moments, catching up with the drivers, finding out how the team is working in these unprecedented times. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Jaguar Racing driver Mitch Evans and race director James Barclay. Hey guys, how are you both?
Yeah, we're good. Well, I'm good. Obviously been in lockdown here in Europe or in France for like 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks now. So strange times, really strange times, but trying to make the most of it in different areas. Kind of hard to plan for these times, but yeah, it's sort of a good time to look back at old races, good races, and talk through it, especially with some races coming up that would have been happening.
Looks sunny where you are.
Yeah, I'm in the south of France. So I'm quite lucky. It's been pretty good weather, sort of high teens, early 20s. Can't go far and go to the beach or anything, but still, it's nice and warm. Trying to keep my fitness up as much as possible. Going 500 meters in France, we can only go 500 meters from the house. So like I've done a few laps of the property and everything. I'm actually at Andre Lotterer's house, one of our competitors. And ironically, a guy that plays a big part in saying that we're going to be, following very soon. So, here for a bit and then probably head to Monaco in a few days.
Absolutely, yeah. And James, what about you?
Yeah, it's for us, it's been again unprecedented times really. Keeping we all as a team now are working from home, so just can't do to life working from home, working remotely. Daily kind of team calls, all our usual reviews we do in person, we're now doing over the phone. Just a technical meeting literally just before we started here. So yeah, a week and a half into that now, we're starting to get a bit of a rhythm with it. It obviously hasn't come without its challenges, but something that everyone is now finding their feet with. And I think there's great team spirit, although challenging, something which is just another challenge we have to take on board and overcome. And obviously the bigger picture of what's happening at the moment is really important, that we stay home, stay safe, and continue to operate the team as best we can, albeit remotely. So yeah, it's unusual times, but one that we're starting to find our rhythm with now, and we're looking forward clearly to going back racing when we can. And that's the key focus for us now. Continue our preparations. We started this season really well, so it's about keeping that focus from our point of view on making sure we're in the best possible position when we return to racing and we go green again.
Now, both of you have been involved with the race team since the very beginning, since Jaguar Racing was Panasonic Jaguar Racing, I should say, was first born. James, just tell me about the project initially, how it all came about.
Yeah, so kind of winding the clock back now to 2015, we confirmed our entry into Formula E in December 2015. I remember well, Amanda, you and I at the Shard in London announcing the return of Jaguar to motorsport. And the precursor to that really was a number of, I would say, conversations and at least 2 years worth of early discussions around returning to racing. But it had to be for the right reasons. It couldn't be just for returning to racing for racing's sake. Racing is at the heart of the Jaguar DNA, but we were very kind of clear it had to be for the right reasons. And what became apparent during that period as we were reviewing our options was that very clearly electrification was the future. The world was going electric, and we had been watching Formula E since the first season. We've been talking to the guys at Formula E, and after that first season, although just a startup year, it was apparent there was some very interesting ingredients to Formula E that could make it incredibly appealing for us. Of course, in the background, Jaguar was, and we had our first ever and first all-electric car in the pipeline, the Jaguar I-Pace, and we wanted a program that would at the same time bring racing back to the Jaguar brand, be able to be a platform to launch that EV, and it was the perfect timing. I think when we look back at it, I think the exact wording we used at that point in time is the timing couldn't be better, and that was absolutely the case. So yeah, decision was quite quickly made. We had to get an entry into the championship, and that wasn't so straightforward because there weren't franchises. There weren't team entries just available, and we were sort of on a holding pattern, really, waiting for the opportunity to arise. And an opportunity did come up, and we obviously took it with both hands. And yeah, the rest now is history, right? Our first season started in 2016. We had a very short ramp into our first season, but yeah, looking back, it's been an incredible journey so far, and great to have the Jaguar back in motorsport. Great to have started to see our first success and to have done it together, and Mitch has been there every step of the way.
James, I remember that period. I remember when the decision had been made for Jaguar to re-enter motorsport, and as you say, sitting in that holding pattern. How frustrating was it for you that you weren't actually able to sort of start making plans at that time, resulting in it all being a short, if you like, as you say, it was a very short run into that first race. Was that a really frustrating period?
It was, and it wasn't. It was in the sense that we had a great opportunity as we saw it, and we were just raring to go, really. But of course, one of the positives about this championship is the way the team structure works. So there were then only 10 teams allowed in Formula E. They're now capacity at 12 teams. So it's positive in terms of the franchise value that teams have, and so it was understandable. But yeah, we were starting to get worried that the opportunity wouldn't come maybe until season 5, which is when Formula went from 10 teams to 12 teams. So actually, it was a bit of a relief when it came off. But then obviously the conversation was, there's obviously going to be a very short lead time into our first season. So I think it's fair to say we didn't want to do it behind another team. We wanted it to be us from the start, but we knew we'd have to learn in public, and that was part of what we took on board, part of what we accepted. Yeah, to be honest, we were just really glad to have that entry into the championship to fill up the plan as we saw it, and it led perfectly for the first season up to the launch of the I-Pace, which was timing-wise perfect. And now, we're, I think it's fair to say, a fully functioning, a front-running team in the championship. And the last time we were in motorsport was Formula One, which was obviously over 12 years ago at the time. But actually, our last true works involvement goes a lot further back than that. So there was nothing. There's no leftover of the motorsport team in Jaguar. It was about building everything from scratch. So I think looking back, that's something which it was a journey which clearly had a lot of challenges, but something the whole team has relished and continues to relish.
Mitch, what about you? What was your journey to where you are now, and how did you get involved with Jaguar?
Yeah, I mean, I was competing in GP2 at the time. I was just coming off the back of my 4th season, so I was obviously very focused on getting to F1 for many years. Things didn't really go to plan, unfortunately. Unfortunately. And the whole program with Jaguar coming back into motorsport, into Formula E, came at the most perfect time for me. Looking back, it was a lifesaver to sort of put myself back on track on sort of obviously on a world stage that wasn't going to be Formula One. And I'd accepted the fact that I was going to get there. So when I got the call, my management got the call to test for Jaguars, it was like, okay, it was perfect timing. And then obviously it was still a few hurdles to get over to try and get the seat. So I had an evaluation with the team in Donington. Didn't really know much about the championship. Obviously, I'd followed it to a degree because I had good friends that were driving in it, guys that I raced against in GP3 and GP2 that were driving it, and also other high-profile drivers. So you obviously take it seriously, even though it was this really new form of motorsport. So the fact that a massive car brand like Jaguar was come back into motorsport and into the championship, obviously was really interesting and something that I wanted to obviously try and get myself into. And the test went obviously well, but it was a new track for me. It was a Donington, a whole new car, and you've got one day to try and do something to show you've got some sort of potential to try and obviously lead the team in the right direction and to be a right driver for the brand. And obviously there's a lot that goes behind the scenes. That it's not just being obviously fast, it's sort of feedback, it's the marketing side. So you got to take all these things into consideration. And fortunately, did enough to convince the guys to give me the seat, which was amazing. But we obviously, after the first few tests, we knew that we were going to be, sort of behind a bit, obviously from experience, but also with the powertrain, with the time frame, as James touched on. There was not much time at all to design a powertrain. So yeah, we're having two rookies, a fresh team, and a sort of not the most efficient car out there. We were like trying to climb Everest. It was quite challenging. But obviously we grew so much trying to do that. It was crazy times because from my point of view, you're trying to obviously prove yourself to obviously continue with the team, to be re-signed. I had a 1-year contract alongside Adam Carroll, and to try and prove yourself and obviously help the team and obviously show what you're capable of doing in those circumstances. Not easy because you're not obviously getting the great results that everyone's wanting to achieve and that that you want to be, obviously spraying champagne and then it's easier for teams to justify your worth. But when you're trying to scrape into the points and do what you can, that's when it becomes really challenging to prove what you're capable of doing. So obviously I had a great benchmark with Adam next to me in the first season, and I was able to obviously, let's say within the battle of the teammates, come out on top and do enough in a few races that, sometimes you get 1 or 2 races in a year where you have to show what you're capable of doing, and opportunities present themselves, like in Mexico and, qualifying in Buenos Aires with topping our group. Those small little things is what, the guys in the team are looking to see in those little glimpses of performance. So I was very lucky and happy that I could do, some of those performances, and then to be re-signed, that was the biggest challenge. And then obviously coming into season 4 with a more competitive powertrain, more experience, new people coming into the team as well. I was still in a growing stage. We could start to get some good results and start to get our first podium, first pole. And then obviously that's, progressed massively since then. And I think one of the most important things of that first year being so difficult for everyone is that we laid some really, really strong foundations, which has got us to where we are now. Okay, it's maybe a little bit longer than some people thought or what we would have liked, but we knew realistically this is going to be the time frame that we needed to get to the position we were at now, and that's one of the top teams in Formula E. So yeah, very happy with obviously the journey so far. We've had a lot of great journeys, very a lot of sort of dark times, but very, very much feel part of the Jaguar family, and that's very special, and it will always be a special time of my life.
So James, going back to that very beginning part, how do you even start putting a race team together from scratch? You've got to find team members, and of course you've also got to find your drivers.
Yeah, well, the first fundamental part for us, which was actually intrinsic as we were preparing, once we'd made the decision about Formula E, was firstly our technical partner. So with Williams Advanced Engineering, we had a technical partner who had understanding of Jaguar, how we worked, of the technology. They obviously were providing the battery. They knew the championship in terms of what. From their perspective, it wasn't a partner who didn't have an understanding of what Formula E stood for, and there was a great synergy between the two companies there. So from our point of view, firstly was getting the right technical partner involved in the program. So that was the first really major step in the process. We have some fantastic engineers at Jaguar Land Rover, but we hadn't been racing, as I mentioned. So bringing that race experience into the mix was key for us. And if you like, shaping it from the ground up was something we knew we'd have to do regardless. And so Williams as a technical partner were perfect for that. So that was the first key step. And what we have now built over these 3 years is a very solid and a very strong and very competitive base, a great group of people who've largely been there since the first season. Clearly some evolution to that, but it's testament to the strength of that starting base with a technical partner that's allowed us to continue to progress to where we are now. So that was the first major step in the process, and then of course the next thing is everything down to individual team member selection, the right people in the right roles. That was always critical. And a big part of that obviously is the driver side, and it's great actually hearing Mitch kind of talk through that phase, and it's something I remember really well. And I remember the phone call from, we've been in contact with Mark. Clearly Mitch was someone who we were interested in, and it's funny because Mitch and I haven't probably even had this conversation together really in this sense, but Mark called me before we went testing, and we were still finalising the driver lineup, and Mark called to say he'd had a conversation. Mitch had a conversation around the next steps and from what Mitch was keen to do next. And as I said, Mitch had been on our radar anyway, and we had some early kind of discussions. So for me, that was a real positive. And in the team, we were very keen, very interested in Mitch. We'd had Adam Carroll at that point of time, who'd done actually some of the early development work with us. And so I remember we kind of had Mitch come to Donington. Mitch had never seen Donington, actually. He'll probably laugh about this. He'd never seen Donington before. And to be honest, we hadn't really kind of gone into a huge amount of detail about that, because obviously Donington is not hugely representative of Formula E circuit. But, it was a reminder when he arrived on the day he actually hadn't been there before. And, that was one of the things which, stood out to us with Mitch, is he turned up at Donington and straight away was quick, and people that had won races and won championships there that day, Mitch was straight up to speed and going very quickly, and that was something which straight away made us stand up and take notice, because Formula E is about adapting quickly. And at that point in time, even as a new team, we knew that was going to be the case. It wasn't a case of going to traditional race circuits that everyone knew. And straight away, there's a really kind of good feeling together. And that was a pivotal moment, and something which I look back with fondness actually in terms of how that process worked. So driver-wise, it was. We had a few options, but clearly from our point of view, we were a rookie team, and we felt that it was good to try and identify a young talent to come into the team and start the journey with us. And Mitch perfectly fit that bill. And in Adam, we had a driver who had a huge amount of success in other categories, and had been really taking the fight to people like Lewis in other categories, Lewis Hamilton, and had fought at the front of most things he'd ever been in. He won races in pretty much everything he competed in. So we knew Adam was a great talent. So that was that was a real pressure point, because we signed Mitch obviously after the test in the pre-season test. So that was fairly close to starting racing. But we wanted to have the right driver joining Adam, and that was a really critical decision for us. So we braved it out until the end, and that was the direction we've gone. And since that day, we've always said that, from what we can see, Mitch is one of those naturally talented guys in the championship, and that's now, he's been able to show that as we've given him better equipment to do that with.
Now, for both of you, the first 2 seasons were a real learning curve. How much of a learning experience was that period for you? And I mean, can you remember much about the first race in Hong Kong? James, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I remember it really well. I mean, I think, to be honest, we were always really clear from day one. One thing we didn't underestimate is how strong the competition was then, and has only got stronger since. So we were very pragmatic, and we said the first year would be about learning. We actually didn't have, and we were very careful about setting any expectations, because it isn't constructive. You have to come in and accept that you have to learn. You can't run before you can walk, and that was very much our attitude. So everything from race strategy, the systems, the tools. I mean, it really comes down to basics. The tools that you employ and you use on the weekend, they don't just magic themselves up, and you have to think at that point in time that the championship was still very much in early infancy, still very early in terms of teams using their own powertrains. So the tools, the systems we use, it was in some cases a bit trial and error in terms of what was the best way to go. We didn't have our simulator fully up and running, so it's not like today when we prepared before we go to races. Mitch and Adam didn't have that. They didn't have that benefit right at the start. So, yeah, my early memory was really about trying as best we could prepare for something we didn't know exactly what we were going to face. We could plan as much as we could, but we hadn't been there before. So it was being ready for all eventualities. What I remember about Hong Kong, though, and the build-up to Hong Kong, is clearly a huge effort from everyone involved to turn literally a blank sheet of paper in December into a fully functioning race team come Hong Kong, which was incredibly tight. Homologating the car in pretty much 4 months, then doing the doing the crash test in 4 months, homologating the car over the next period running up to pre-season testing and at that point in time. So we actually started that season in October, so it was a bit shorter than even we have now. So looking back, actually we had everything. We had shorter lead time, we had an earlier season start. It was really an uphill challenge, but massive effort from everybody. And I look back at that period of pride in terms of what we were able to achieve in a short space of time, and then turning up in Hong Kong to probably the most aggressive race in terms of heat we've ever had in the championship. It was brutal. I think it was something like 32 degrees and 100% humidity. So I remember the first race being, a welcome to Formula E. It was a bit of a baptism of fire.
And Mitch, what about you? Because also for you, it was a completely different type of racing.
Hong Kong will always be on my memory for a number of reasons. To be honest, I was signed up quite late, so I just did the official testing, and then we're straight into it. I was sort of overlapping with the end of my GP2 season, but I was really excited for the start of this new journey. And then it was a massive build up. Obviously, with Jaguar come back into motorsport was a huge thing in global motorsport, and there was a lot of PR, a lot of attention around that. We knew realistically, where we were going to stack up, and we also had to keep everyone's expectations in check, because you don't want to come in there, obviously, talking it up and then not delivering. So it was a big week. I remember me and Adam were quite active, let's say, from the PR side, which was a really cool experience. So I've basically gone from doing nothing in GP2, because you don't really do any media, to like 100%, like full gas the whole week, and that was quite a eye opener. And then get into the race weekends. Unfortunately we had an issue with one of my cars. Obviously back then we had two cars in Formula E, and we had an inverter problem on one car which we could not fix at the track. It was a factory sort of. We had to go take it back to the factory in a really safe environment to actually fix the inverter. And so to go into a race weekend, I was not going to actually finish a race already, was a bit bizarre. So, but just it was a massive tidal wave of sort of things coming at us that whole weekend. We could hardly keep up with the structure of a Formula E day, because it's so intense. You're up at 5 a.m. You've got FP1 at 8. You've got FP2 not long after. Then you're straight into qualifying, and then you've got signing. You're doing interviews, blah blah blah, and then you're on the grid in the race. And you're thinking, God, like where's the time gone? And this is the most important time of the day. So that was for everyone involved. That was just a huge eye opener. It was brutal, and obviously not to finish a race was a huge shame. But to be honest, we probably weren't going to have a great race anyway. Just the nature of everything that was sort of, it was really up against it. But it was, looking back now, it was a crazy experience. And but since then, we've come a long way. That first race in Formula E will stick with me for a long time.
James, what would you say the biggest steps have been made by the team in the last 2 years?
First 2 years of racing really taught us on every front, whether it's the design of the car, from the powertrain perspective, whether it's the team operations in terms of how we call our race strategies. There is no substitute for experience when it comes to racing sometimes, and I think that's probably the key takeout for me. And if anything, that first year we said, listen, we have to have a car that's reliable. It's going to allow us to finish races to get experience. We knew we'd have to compromise on some performance with the time frame we had, but let's make sure we're finishing races and getting the data, getting the information. I remember it's a line I said relentlessly, which is, it's another race. It's another race of data, and these are races that everyone had been to, tracks that people have been to, and every time we took a step, every time we took another step forward, and not only was it race by race, but season by season. And we now, I think, I've always said the start of every year, it's not that it gets easier, but it becomes more comfortable in the sense that you understand the challenges you're going to face and where you need to address your attention, your focus. And that's allowed us to take a step forward. So now, from a car perspective, the powertrain wise, I think we've shown, last year, at the end of last season, we had arguably one of the quickest cars in the championship, and we started this season really well. So I think it's shown that we are getting ourselves to a point where we can design and engineer an incredibly fast, incredibly capable race car with a Jaguar I-Type. And from a team operations point of view, we're taking steps, and we have made steps that allow us to make the right strategy calls at the right time as a team. So it's across the board. And Mitch as a driver, as an example, just look at the experience Mitch has gained and how effective he is now in qualifying races, and it's the same across the team. We all, that experience to now use is a weapon in our armory we never had before.
Last question on season 3. You were involved in Mexico in one of the biggest incidents that I think we've already seen. What were your memories? What do you remember from that?
And here comes Nico Prost, he hits him, round goes Heidfeld, pirouetting in the stadium, and then a shunt, and the two teammates hit each other. Mitch Evans is caught up in all of that as well.
Yeah, Mexico season 3 was a wild race. I think it was, from memory, I think it had the most amount of passes in Formula E history. I think Adam and I qualified sort of mid-pack to the back. And then we were coming, actually made some good progress, and then there's a lot of carnage throughout the whole race. Honestly, I can't really remember most of the race because it was that busy. But obviously the vital time was towards the end of the race when we're in a good position, running to the top 7, top 6. And then that was already going to be a huge result for us to get our first points in the championship. And then I think it was 2 laps to go. We had it was a bit of a tussle in front of me into the stadium section, and I was trying to avoid it as much as I could, but I got tagged from behind, which should have chucked the rear of the car. From my experience, I would have expected the right rear to be destroyed and for it to be a terminal failure. So for me to come through that after the hit and look in my mirror and see the right rear still attached, and I was like, okay, obviously it's going to break in the next few corners or something's going to happen. But it didn't, and somehow got through it after a massive amount of contact, and then finishing the race in P4. Adam as well in the points. So our best result, just off the podium, first points, absolutely crazy into the race. I mean, it was amazing. So I think there was actually a lot of damage to the car afterwards, which I think the mechanics were stunned that we actually made it to the finish. It was an amazing moment.
In season 4, you and the team secured your very first pole position in a race that really could have been. Can you just tell me about how that race weekend went from your perspective?
Zurich was wild. It was obviously amazing to get our first pole position in Zurich. We were competitive all day, put a good lap together in Super Pole, in quali, and then obviously in Super Pole to get our first pole positions.
Will it be a Jaguar at the front of the grid? Yes! A 1 minute 12.811.
Yes! Real good.
A great moment. The first of anything is a very special moment to get our first pole in Formula E. As we all know how difficult the qualifying format is in Formula E, it was nice to achieve that. And then obviously when you're sitting on the front row, you don't want to look back, and you don't want to obviously lose any positions. You want to stay there and try and convert, your good 1 lap pace into a strong race. Unfortunately, that didn't quite happen. For quite a few reasons. We were struggling with a few problems at the start of the race from a software point of view, which sort of put us off track from a energy sort of optimization point of view for the rest of the race. So I was sort of behind on energy compared to the rest, even though I had track position. And then I started getting eaten up a little bit from a couple of guys, and that was getting frustrating because I thought we had the fastest car out there, or we were had the fastest package out there. And then it started to slip away, and for me, the writing was on the wall a bit that we didn't have the pace during the race. So naturally you get, a bit anxious. And then we had a full course yellow, and during our pit stop, and we had a pit limited disengagement problem, which made me overspeed and then resulted in a drive-through penalty. So yeah, it was just like, a huge high. You know, it was all looking pretty good, leading the race, lost a few places, and then got slapped with a penalty. So yeah, that was hard to take. It was pretty dark after that. For obviously, I let the team down in some ways. There's other ways, you know, there's some things we could have done differently. Ultimately, in season 4, we probably didn't have the best race car in terms of efficiency, but we had a fast car, and it was hard to accept that.
James, for you, I mean, it's a snapshot really of, you knew it was going to be a tough journey, an awful lot of learning, but this was what could be. This is, you know, you were starting to sort of make progress really.
It's not without lessons like Zurich that you learn to understand how to build a championship as a team together. And I think, so like I said, if I step back, although tough at that weekend in terms of the roller coaster ride it had, it was actually an incredibly powerful journey for the team in terms of our, again, building into our armory and things that we use now as a team as a strength rather than the weakness. That experience was king.
So skipping ahead now to season 5, obviously a couple of seasons experience under your belt, but now you've got the challenge of a totally different type of racing because we're now into one car. Mitch, what was that like? What was the adjustment like?
In a way, it was good for us because as a team, that was quite an experience. It was a level playing field in many ways. So, and our team was starting to sort of, for the first 2 seasons, we were obviously still building the structure of the team, more people coming into it. Season 5, we were starting to sort of stabilize and we're the core people and the people that have been with us since day one and new people that have come into the team and had started to find their feet, and we started to understand the championship more and what the car and this technology needed for us to be competitive. And I guess season 5 was the first time we could actually show that, even though it was a very up and down season. But going into it, it was obviously cool to have a new car, a car where we did the whole race on with one battery, one car, instead of doing the car swap, which was, I think, for the whole championship was a huge step forward and a huge moment. And then for us, we just saw it as an opportunity to try and obviously close the gap to the top few teams. We started off the season well in Saudi, where we were P4, and then unfortunately after that we ran into some problems. Obviously we were trying. Formula E is a development race, especially during the season through software. We would try and avenues, to try and obviously unlock performance, but sometimes, you go down the wrong path, and it takes a few races for you to obviously realize that, accept it, and then go down another one. So we went through a bit of a patch where we lost some performance and some consistency. And then it was actually just before Rome, we changed our sort of direction and just in a few things, and wanted to reset in Rome. We really, put our heads down and found some things that we were maybe not, maximizing. And then, when it came back into the European season at Rome, we put it all together and obviously had our, an amazing race in Rome. So, and then after that, we obviously continued our good form and got a lot of podiums and points, and then we were fighting for the championship up until New York. So yeah, it was a huge season for many reasons, because we did go through a bit of a dark period, but we came out the other side really strong, and that's obviously continued up until now.
So moving on back on now to season 5, it was a tale of 2 halves, really, wasn't it? James, what was going on with the team and what were the changes being made?
As a team, we always look at things as an opportunity, right? And a new car allowed us as a team, who's still one of the newer teams in the championship, to use that as an advantage, right? To kind of catch up. So for us, it was a big step in terms of the car and making what we felt would be a very competitive package, which obviously the car did turn out to be. So that was the first part of the year, was really, and the lead into the season was taking the Generation 2 Formula E car regulations and making a front-running car. And we felt we'd done a good job. I remember when we first had the rollout of the car and the shakedown. Mitch felt positive about how the car felt, but we did, as with always, we didn't know where we stood until we turned up in pre-season testing, and even then you don't get a full picture. It's only really the first 3 races, I always say, that starts to give you a bit of a barometer in terms of where you are. And as Mitch said, we started the season out really well positively in Riyadh. Again, Riyadh last year and Riyadh this year. So Riyadh season 5 and Riyadh in season 6 have been similar. With massive rain in season 5, which flooded the circuit. This year we had a lot of dust, so it's never been an easy one to judge where you are. But the indicators were that we were very, very fortunate. And then, for me, looking back on season 5, we got to Marrakesh, and if I think about it, then we actually had a very competitive qualifying, both cars in the top 10. And we had that incident at turn 1 where Jev spun going into turn 1, and both Mitch and Nelson had to go massively off track. I think Mitch dropped. I think Mitch, you probably remember. I think we dropped all the way down to like 20th with Mitch. So I mean, you talk about Mitch from basically fighting for P4 going all the way back to 20th. It was not a good start to the race, and that didn't help us. If that incident happened at turn 1, with the first half of the season being different, possibly to some degree, but it's hard to say. Like in racing, I always say, shoulda, woulda, coulda, but the results speak for themselves, right? So ultimately, Mitch kind of explained it really well. The first half of the season was difficult because we knew we had a fast car, but we were being understandably aggressive in the directions we were going to try and gain performance. But sometimes you take the wrong journey, you take the wrong fork in the road, and we got to the halfway point, and we said, actually, just stop. Let's stop a second. We know the base car is good. We felt positive about that. We didn't think we were kidding ourselves. We knew we had all the ingredients. We just had to put it together in the right way. And I remember we had dinner in Rome on the Wednesday, and we got together and we said, we've got everything. We have the right people. We have the right car. Alex had joined the team at that point. And we said, let's just go out, restart the season now in Rome, as if it's our first race. Let's go and enjoy it, and let's enjoy fighting at the front. And honestly, it's one of those moments I'll look back in my time and say, what an incredible... You couldn't have written the script any other way, for Mitch to then go out and deliver a phenomenal quali, and to deliver an amazing race. Still, I would say arguably probably the best race of the Generation 2 Formula E car, where you had the real cat and mouse with attack mode on what is my favourite circuit in Formula E. I think Mitch would agree from a driver's perspective. It just turned out to be an epic weekend, and the second half was a different journey then. I'm
guessing Rome has particularly fond memories for you as well. Your first win, how did that feel?
Yeah, going back, rewind the clock back to season 4 Rome, that was another race of what could have been. We qualified well, we were racing well throughout the race. I think I qualified 3rd, and with the old sort of format with the 2-car system, we opted to go long in the first car, then short on the second car to have a fast into the race. And I was catching Sam, and I was basically on his gearbox, had a few goes at him, and then ran out of energy on the last few laps.
Here we go, Mitch Evans and Andre Lotterer coming up towards Lavoro at turn 9. They're all fanning out, and Bird covers the inside. Evans dummies Bird, locks up, they survive. Evans hasn't got enough energy, look, he's down to 2%.
I'm not gonna make it, mate, I'm out.
And at the time, I thought I just screwed up. I was a bit too eager on energy consumption. But we unfortunately had a motor problem, which was overheating and churning up energy. So it was almost our first proper podium and potential win. We never got the podium in Hong Kong, but to stand on the podium, to all of a sudden not even finishing, almost not finishing. I think I finished 9th or 10th. It was just how did that happen? So to come back a season later to the same track, qualify well, after we'd been through a bit of a, relatively rough patch, and obviously with Alex coming on board for that race onwards, it was a bit let's reset the season in a way, and go from there. So we're all hoping for just, a strong result, get ourselves back on track, but to come back and obviously convert into a victory was absolutely insane.
Mitch Evans through the final corner to win the Romy Prix for Jaguar. Yeah!
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for the hard work. You guys are awesome.
So James, looking now to season 6, we're entering season 6 with Mitch having been in the championship title fight in the last 2 races in New York. We've got race wins under our belt. And we've got more regulation changes. So how did the team sort of approach the new season?
We had a positive, season 5. So if anything, I think we felt on the right side of the new car. And it was really about, again, evolving the car and evolving our team processes to kind of take those really valuable learnings from season 5. In fact, arguably season 5 was our year we learned the most. So it was just putting that into practice, and a few kind of key changes for this season, like I said, on the sporting side, which we just had to make sure we were on top of. Again, we in testing, it was hard to say really where we stood in the pecking order. We focused on our program, and then turning up in Riyadh, we could see we were competitive for sure. But I think one of the things the season's shown is it is so close this year, and Riyadh is a good example. Obviously we were formally rewards you in an unusual way by Mitch was on group 1, I should say, for Riyadh, which the track evolution was like 1.2 seconds group 1 to 2, and we don't like to talk about the track evolution group 1 to 2 because we always say in the team we'd rather be in group 1 and deal with the conditions than be further back, right? Because it means you're in the leading group of the championship. So, but that was a tough one, but more for Mitch behind the wheel having to deal with that than us in the garage. But clearly we showed we were quick, although we didn't maximise points that weekend. We felt positive with where we started and where the car was, and obviously subsequently we've had a really competitive season to date, and Santiago, we just showed how quick the car was then. Again, Mitch had a fantastic qualifying, and to be on the front row is always a massive positive, and to finish on the podium was good. But we are a really competitive group now, and Santiago was a great example where we knew we hadn't optimized everything. We had a system issue there which stopped us fighting for the win. Mitch did a great job, and the team did a fantastic job with that in mind to kind of to secure the podium, because it could have got a lot worse. And I think another really good example of the team bonding together, dealing with a high pressure situation and overcoming it to score points. Your season is judged on how you challenge the hard times, sometimes not on how you get the easy ones. And that was a great example, as we could have thrown everything away that day, but actually Mitch and the team didn't, and that was a really ultimately strong race for us as we look back. And then it's funny in racing, isn't it? Sometimes you think certain places feel kinder to you than others, and the scene of the Mexico, if you like, 4th place in our first season, like we just talked about. For us, our best performance in the championship to date in terms of I would say quali and the race. And the race was just Mitch made his mark really early on in turn 1 with a very decisive move on Andre, and we didn't look back, and he didn't look back. So from that point, I would say arguably our right up there with Roma, arguably our most competitive showing to date in the championship. And so, obviously then Marrakesh, and repeated the pace again, although couldn't quite deliver the ultimate result as a result of what happened in qualifying. Well, we just missed the check flag in qualifying. But again, Mitch's lap time would have put him on pole position. So it just shows that we're quick. So in some ways, ending where we did in Marrakesh with a phenomenal race through the field by Mitch, it's just left us wanting more right now. Here we are working from home. Mitch isolated out there, ironically with Andre, as he said, of all people. We're raring to go back racing, to be honest, because now when you've been in that position, you just want to go again and again and again, and keep racing. And so probably, if anything, Mitch, I know, will be biting his nails, desperate to get back in the car, as we all are, to go back racing.
Mitch, going into the season, what were your ambitions?
Yeah, I think they were quite clear, because we had finished season 5 off so strongly. Fighting for the championship, for the title into New York was a great moment, but unfortunately didn't, let's say, fulfill our sort of goals to the full extent. Finishing 5th overall looks like a great achievement. Don't get me wrong, but you just want more, and it could have been a lot different as well. So obviously heading into season 6, obviously there's been a mass amount of work gone into the new powertrain, a whole new rear end for us, which had been obviously hours and hours of work at the factory, for good 12 to 18 months, and then to finally put it onto track in Valencia for official testing, but obviously for the first round in Saudi, with all the other teams with the same idea and trying to fine tune this generation 2 car. We were confident that we had a good car, but we knew that others were going to be in a very, very, very similar position. So it sort of comes down to the fine details of all the systems, all the things that can bring you just small bits of performance, whether it's having the car comfortable for me, or just little things that will, at the end of the day, if they're little crumbs, that will end up making a small difference. And that could be the difference between being right at the front, or at the top end of the mid pack. So it got into Saudi, we were confident, and we got some points, but as a double header, you want to score on both races, and we didn't manage that. We managed, obviously, in the first race was a good race, because we were, as James touched on, in Group 1, came back through from a disappointing quali, and got some points, which was great. And then the race 2, we qualified well. We were dicing in the top 5, but obviously we had that contact with Sam, which was really disappointing. Looking back at it was it's very, very hard to swallow, but no one to really blame, or probably both to blame for that accident. I could have backed out of it. He could have gave me more room. It's one of those ones that you can argue to the end of the day, and not have someone raise their hand about it. So yeah, that was a shame, but just more disappointing was just that we just didn't capitalize on healthy points. And then over Christmas and into the new year, the team never stopped working, and it's pretty impressive to see the work ethic and the determination within the team. And we came out, and I sort of had given them some direction on brake settings, on things that I wanted to change from the first few races in Saudi, and they absolutely gave me what I needed to get pole position that race, and that was awesome. In Santiago, our second pole position in Formula E, the first in the Generation 2 car. But then in the race, it was a bit similar to Zurich in a way, not as bad, but it was a bit strange, because obviously we had a good margin in qualifying, and then we encountered some really bizarre things in the race. So dropping back, from leading the race to second, and then obviously to third towards the end. To obviously get a podium was still obviously an amazing result, but sort of left us, scratching our heads a bit. And it wasn't really till we got back to the factory and really analyzed everything to realize actually how lucky we were to finish a race. And we had a few things that we're managing during the race, but there was other things in the background that were very, let's say, touch and go, whether they would let us see the checkered flag. So to actually get a podium was a bit of a miracle. And then obviously coming into Mexico, it was a great quali again. I was a bit disappointed not to get pole, but in this game you just got to obviously be towards the front to have any sort of chance at pulling a good result. And so to be second was I could accept. And then ironically, I'm actually staying at Andre's house at the moment, but to get Andre off the line was crucial. Unexpected, because to be honest, being on the dirty side, I was expecting him to get a better start than us. But to get the overlap I had to have a little sniff into turn one, and it paid off. And then after that, our efficiency was amazing, and it was a huge turnaround from Santiago. But obviously, we were fighting, a lot of things there, so we couldn't really show our full potential, and we could obviously in Mexico. And
one of the most dominant races in the history of the championship, Mitch Evans wins in Mexico City.
When you're out front and no one's sort of challenging you, you can run your own race and save energy in areas where you normally can't if you're under threats or attacking. So it was a perfect race for us, and it really sort of stamped our authority that we're here as a serious challenger. And yeah, that was a really nice feeling to reward everyone with a really dominant performance, and just to show everyone's hard work. That was epic. That was a very, very cool feeling. And then obviously to continue that into Marrakesh was the plan. Things were looking good after free practice too. We were quickest, and then we obviously had a communication problem in qualifying to not make the start of quali. We thought we had like 5 seconds margin, and what I was seeing on my screen was different to what was actually happening and what the team was seeing. So it was a very avoidable mistake, but it happened easily if you're getting 2 different sources of information directed to you. So to miss out on getting my qualifying lap was a shame, because obviously we were competitive. But then to really obviously not let it get to us, and that was really critical and key for that day, was to obviously accept the pain of that and go, look, we've got a quick car, let's try and just salvage something from today. And we did that. We had a very aggressive strategy that we optimized really well, and the team directed me well with that. But to come away with that sort of with that result, 18 places made up in a race with no real DNFs or safety cars or yellow flags or anything was huge. For me, it's a very powerful message to send to the rest of the championship and the rest of the competitors, that we're not inconsistent like we were last year. We're consistently got this performance, and we're ready to show it every race and at different types of circuits and venues. So that was important to show, but more importantly to get some really vital points for the championship.
Right. So during this pause in racing, I know we're all desperate to get back out as soon as we are able to. I'm going to set you both a little challenge. You now have to tell me. I'm going to ask James the question first. Mitch, I'm giving you a few minutes to think about this one.
Good.
You now need
I'm Group 1. Are you saying I'm Group 1, Amanda? This is
yes, James. You're
Group 1 conditions.
Hopefully there's track evolution.
Exactly right. Your challenge is this: you need to tell me your dream driver lineup. No, you cannot have a current Jaguar driver. So obviously you don't need to offend Mitch if you don't include him, because you can't have him. You have to have one driver from the past and one driver from the present. Go. James, who would you choose?
So there have to be 2 drivers we don't have at the moment. 2
drivers, one from the past, one from the present.
Yeah. That's a very difficult question for a man like me. You know that, Amanda. So you're potentially handing our competitive advantage here. I think looking at it
from Formula E,
the driver,
wherever you like,
forever. Okay.
From wherever you like. Oh
yeah.
Wow, that expands it. That expands it quite massively. Well, I think.
I mean, obviously they've got to be good at Formula E. So.
Yeah, no, I think if you say the past as a whole, you would be, I would say, silly not to put a name like Senna. Someone who was incredibly intelligent, someone who had a phenomenal record on street circuits. So he would be an obvious one that you'd have to say. I think with his approach to racing would have no doubt been a formidable competitor. And then, I think if you look at the statistics of Formula E in terms of the present. I can't choose our good company at the moment with Mitch, of course, who'd be a natural choice for me. I think you have to look at who's had success in the championship, and you then come down to you could argue a Jev, Buemi, and Di Grassi, and
you can't have all three of them. There's only one seat. So
yeah,
who would you go for?
I'll leave you guessing on one of those.
No, you've got to choose one, because Mitch can't have any of your drivers, so you can't sort of hog three of them.
So there's the deal. So I would go with Sebastian.
Sebastian. Okay, so you have Senna and Sebastian Buemi. Mitch, who would you have in your team?
As a past driver, I've been trying to toss up. There's a few guys that I massively respect. Obviously, Senna being one of them. I would have to say, I think Schumacher would have been mega in Formula E, just because obviously he's incredibly intelligent, very calculated individual. And I think this type of racing, this format would suit him well. So I'd have to say Schumacher, and I'm a massive fan of Lewis Hamilton as well. So just from his raw speed and consistency, I think he's, for me, Lewis is the greatest driver of all time, and he's obviously still present, and he's still an active racing driver. So I would have to say those two.
So thank you for joining me, guys, and we look forward to checking in with you as we navigate this really challenging time for everybody. And thank you at home for watching. And on Saturday, the 4th of April, we have got a very special treat, because we're going to be streaming the entire Rome E-Prix from season 5, the venue of Jaguar Racing's very first win. And I'm going to be joined by Mitch, James, and Mitch's race engineer, Josette Rocker, to give you their perspectives of this historic race. So keep an eye on the Jaguar Racing channels. Thank you very much, and stay safe.